What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here. Welcome to part 3 of my breakdown of every combat style mod in Destiny 2. Don't worry, the fun isn't quite over. Tomorrow I'll be releasing my Piece de Resistance that breaks down every armor mod in Destiny 2. That video is a passion project of mine, and it would mean a great deal to me if you checked it out. But let's get back to this video. We'll be breaking down what I think are the most underrated mods in the game, Elemental Well mods. I think that Charge of Light mods are so straightforward and easy to understand that they kind of overshadow these mods. But let me tell you, these mods are amazing. I have a few build videos that I will be releasing before Witch Queen that showcase their power as well. But for now, hopefully this video can show you just how powerful these really are. So let's jump into it. First, let's break down how these mods work. So how elemental mods work is similar to the other two types of combat style mods. You have mods that create wells, and then you have mods that give you benefits for picking up the wells. So the first mods we will look at are the general mods. There are 8 in total, 5 of these are used to create wells, and 3 of these will give you a benefit when you pick up the well. So let's take a look at the mods that create wells first, starting with Elemental Ordnance. This mod states that defeating a combatant with a grenade spawns an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type. Which brings me to another point about these mods. They are often element specific, as you will see going forward. The general ones will work with any subclass, so if I kill an enemy with a void grenade, it will spawn a void well. Same goes for solar or arc or stasis. So with that out of the way, as you can see in the background gameplay, I get a kill with my grenade and it spawns an elemental well matching the element that my grenade is. Pretty straightforward. As well, one other thing I should mention is every elemental well mod has the same trait at the bottom, where picking up an elemental well grants energy to your ability with the lowest current energy. Picking up an elemental well whose element matches your subclass damage type grants energy to all of your abilities. This makes these great for ability spam. The last thing you need to know is that these work in a fire team as well, so if your teammate makes an elemental well, you can pick it up and receive the benefits. The next mod is Melee Wellmaker, which is also straightforward. Get a powered melee kill and it will spawn an elemental well that matches your subclass. Important to note here that it must be a powered melee kill and not just any melee kill. Next is Elemental Armaments, which states combatant weapon final blows with a damage type that match your subclass element have an escalating chance to spawn an elemental well. This means if you are running a void subclass and a void weapon, it will spawn a void elemental well after so many kills. In my testing, I discovered these have the exact same spawn rate as Warmind cells. It is not random. After 5 to 6 red bar kills, you will spawn an elemental well, 3 orange bar kills, or a combination of say 2 orange bars and 1 or 2 red bars, and lastly, a final blow on a yellow bar will always spawn an elemental well. I did this with a sword, and you can see I gained Charge with Light for picking up the well. But to better illustrate this, I took out 2 yellow bars with a rocket and you can see the wells spawn in. So that's definitely good to know. And just a reminder, the weapon has to match your subclass element. You can get a million red bar kills with Trinity Ghoul if you want, but if you are running a subclass that isn't Arc, it will never spawn an elemental well. So next we have Elemental Light, which states defeating a combatant with your super spawns an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type. So I first tested this with Chaos Reach and it made me 1 elemental well even though I killed multiple enemies. So I then tested it with Top Tree Stormcaller and killed a bunch of adds and created at least 4 elemental wells, if not more. I also killed 2 yellow bars and both dropped wells. So I then retested it with Chaos Reach, this time killing a yellow bar and some adds and got 2 wells to spawn. So just like with Elemental Armaments, it seems like wells drop after killing a certain amount of red bars, orange bars, or yellow bars. And lastly, we have Shieldcrash Wellmaker, which spawns a well if you break a combatant's shield with a matching weapon type. So say I'm running an Arc subclass, I can spawn a solar elemental well by breaking a solar shield with a solar weapon. What is interesting is this actually procs when breaking a shield with a grenade or melee as well. As long as what you are using matches the shield type, it will make a well. So that is it for the general mods that create wells. Now let us take a look at what kind of benefits we can gain from them. First is Font of Wisdom. I'm not going to make you sit here for 9 minutes while you watch me get my super at 30 intellect, but I will show a side-by-side comparison and explain what is happening. So first off, Font of Wisdom states picking up an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type grants you a temporary significant increase in your intellect, improving the recharge rate of your super. So the base cooldown of Top Tree Stormcaller is 9 minutes and 16 seconds, and at 100 intellect it is 7 minutes and 5 seconds. So what Font of Wisdom does is it gives us the cooldown rate of a tier 10 intellect for 30 seconds whenever we pick up an elemental well. You can see on the side of the screen that when I pick up the well, I get improved ability regen for 30 seconds. I do this over and over until I get my super. It takes me just less than 5.5 minutes to get my super. And if you are wondering how I get it quicker than the base 705 tier 10 regeneration time, That is because I am dealing damage over and over to the Lost Sector boss. And in Bungie's latest sandbox change, they made it so that dealing damage with your primary gives you more super energy. This was implemented as a way to promote primary gunplay in PvP, but it also affects PvE. Pretty significantly in fact. Enough to shave off over 1.5 minutes of my super just by shooting the boss 39 times with my primary. Knowing this, primary weapons that can deal a lot of damage may be very good for super based builds in the future. You could run something like Trinity Ghoul, which deals damage to multiple adds at once, or the exotic pulse rifle Bad Juju, which gives even more super energy back. Or Outbreak Perfected, which is good for single target damage, so you could melt majors with your primary, which greatly benefits your super cooldown. Pairing exotics like that with a Stormdancer's Brace build could be really awesome. And you could run Font of Wisdom if you wanted, so then you could spec into other things like Grenade and Recovery instead of Intellect because you were just getting free Intellect from Font of Wisdom. Obviously, you won't be using it in a closed environment like I was that allowed me to proc it whenever I wanted, but even if you picked up a few wells in between supers, it would certainly help the cooldown. So this mod actually has a lot of utility. However, if you are running a high intellect build, there is literally no point in running it as it does not give back super energy gains higher than tier 10 cooldown. I tested this doing exactly what I am doing with 30 intellect at 100 intellect, and my super cooldown was still 5.5 minutes, identical to what it is at tier 3 with Font of Wisdom. So to summarize, if your intellect is low, this will benefit you greatly. If it is high, you will see very little return, and if you have 100 intellect, you will see no benefit at all. Next, we have an extremely strong mod in Font of Might. This states picking up an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type grants a temporary bonus to weapon damage of that same element type. So again, it is one of those mods that is tied to matching your weapon energy to your subclass energy. So in the background gameplay, I am running an arc hand cannon with an arc subclass, and when I pick up a well, I get an arc weapon boost for 10 seconds. This weapon boost is 25% extra damage, which is pretty significant. But what is amazing about this mod is that it stacks with other buffs, which is extremely rare in Destiny. So in the background gameplay, I throw on high energy fire, which is a 20% damage buff, and then hit a drag for 8,785 damage, where at base, a headshot was dealing 58-57 damage. That is a 50% damage buff, because you get 25% from Font of Might, multiplied by 20% from high energy fire. 1.25 times 1.2 is 1.5. And this also stacks with Well of Radiance or Weapons of Light. Weapons is a 35% damage buff, times the 25% from Font of Might, that is a 68.75% damage buff. And this can be procced on your own. Say you had a Fallen Guillotine Void Sword, you can have Lucent Blade, which is a 35% buff, and Font of Might giving a 25% buff. So for 10 seconds, every sword swing could be dealing 69% more damage. And then you could throw a debuff in there as well. Say Tether, which is a 30% debuff, so now all of a sudden you are dealing 120% more damage, or 2.2x. It is actually pretty crazy. For this reason, Font of Might is extremely strong, but may only be a situational mod. But if you can control it so you're activating it going into a boss damage phase or something, then this can be very deadly. So don't sleep on this mod. And Bungie, please don't patch this and make it not stack anymore. It is very situational, but very fun when you get to pull it off. And now for the last general mod, we have Elemental Charge. Become Charged with Light by picking up an Elemental Well. If the Elemental Well's element matches your subclass element, you gain 2 stacks of Charged with Light. This is actually a very strong mod if you are running a Charged with Light build with wells, or if you have teammates running wells. This also stacks with stacks on stacks, so if you're running Supercharge as well, you can get 4 stacks of Charged with Light by picking up 1 Elemental Well. Super cool. With Bungie changing how guns will spawn orbs in Witch Queen, this mod could take over as the go-to for gaining stacks of Charge with Light rather than taking charge. Time will tell. And that is it for the general mods. Next, we'll jump into the elemental mods. The thing with the elemental mods is a lot of them won't proc if you don't pick up a certain element of Elemental Well mod. I will show you what I mean shortly. So let us start with the solar mods, and we'll look at Well of Life. Well of Life states picking up a solar elemental well grants increased regeneration for a short period of time. This mod is extremely strong as it keeps your health regenerating constantly even if you take damage. However, you must be running a build that can create solar elemental wells. I made void elemental wells while running this and you get no benefit. This is the downside of these mods. Regardless, they can still be extremely strong. I ran this mod earlier in Season of the Lost with Bottom Tree Dawnblade and Sunbracers, and it was super strong because I create lots of solar wells. This allowed me to proc Well of Life often, allowing for great survivability. But back to Well of Life, as you can see in the background gameplay, when I pick up a solar well, I get a buff that says healing for 10 seconds. And as you can see on my health bar, my health is constantly regenerating. It won't keep you from getting one shot, but it certainly can save your life in certain situations. The next mod we'll look at is Bountiful Wells, and this mod states that elemental well mods that cause you to spawn elemental wells can now stack, spawning additional wells for each additional copy of the mod you have equipped. So when I originally tested this, I thought it was bugged because I was stacking Bountiful Wells together. Turns out you have to stack the mods that create the wells. So instead, we should be stacking something like Elemental Ordnance. So if it normally makes one well, and we put Bountiful Wells on, it will now make 2 wells. And then if we put an additional Elemental Ordnance mod on, our grenade will now make 3 wells. If you have 3 Elemental Ordnance mods, you will make 4. Up to a maximum of 3 stacks though. I tried putting 4 Elemental Ordnance mods on, and still only made 4 wells. This is fine though, as if you ran 4 mods plus Bountiful Wells, you wouldn't be able to equip any mods that take advantage of the wells. I did my due diligence and tried stacking these with every well creating mod in the game, and it does not stack with Reaping Wellmaker for some reason. Supreme Wellmaker normally makes 3 stasis orbs, but when stacked 3 times with Bountiful Wells, it makes 6. 1 extra well for each additional stack of Supreme Wellmaker that you have. Makes sense when you think about it. I won't go through every example here, as I think this explanation does it justice. Just know that I tested it with every mod and it works on all of them, except it doesn't stack with Reaping Wellmaker. One mod will give you an additional well, but if you try and stack it, the maximum amount of wells you can make is 2. I'm not sure if this is intentional or a bug, so if you're running a Reaping Wellmaker, don't stack this mod. The last point to note is that even though I have a solar subclass on, Bountiful Wells will proc with any subclass. Mods will specifically state in the description if it is tied to a certain element. So to summarize, Bountiful Wells will give 1 extra well per mod that you have equipped. So 2 Elemental Ordnance mods plus 1 Bountiful Well mod will make 3 total wells for every grenade kill that you get. Hope that makes sense. But that is it. Moving on. So the next mod is Well of Ordnance. Picking up a solar elemental well grants you additional grenade energy. Multiple copies of this mod increase this effect. And this time, that is true. These do actually stack. With 4 stacks, I get about half my grenade energy back from picking up a well, whereas with 1, I only get about a quarter of the grenade charge back, and 2 and 3 are somewhere in between. So like always, it has diminishing returns the more you stack. Also, this one has to be a solar well to get grenade energy back. It will not work with an arc, void, or stasis well. But when paired with something like fusion grenades and Starfire Protocol, or sunbracers and solar grenades, you can make some strong builds with this. I also have another amazing pairing that I use this with, which I will make into a full build video coming before Witch Queen, so stay tuned for that. Hint, it is on the Titan class. And now for the last solar mod, we have Explosive Wellmaker. Rapidly defeating combatants with explosive damage spawns a solar elemental well. So this is great on something like Bottom Tree Dawnblade where you can chain explosions like crazy. Pair it with the Sunshot and you have some great synergy. But something I wanted to test was Dragonfly. Turns out, a Dragonfly explosion, even if it is not solar, can spawn a solar elemental well because it is explosion damage getting the kill. Something cool to know. So to show off the power of how good these can be, I threw on Starfire Protocol with fusion grenades on Bottom Tree Dawnblade, and then had Explosive Wellmaker, Bountiful Wells, Well of Ordnance, and Elemental Ordnance. This allowed me to make 2 wells every time I got a grenade kill, and 2 more wells every time I got an explosion kill from the grenade or melee. You then pick up the wells, which gives you grenade energy back from Well of Ordnance, and you just keep the chain going. This is one of thousands of strong elemental well mods you can build. The synergy is really fun. Next up, we have the Void Elemental Well mods, starting with Enduring Wells. This mod increases the lifespan of elemental wells you create. Multiple copies of this mod stack, further extending the lifespan. So this mod is not just tied to Void mods, it can extend the duration of any well. At base, elemental wells last for 20 seconds, and applying this mod will make the wells last for 10 seconds longer. So with 1 stack, the well will last for 30 seconds, 2 stacks 40 seconds, 3 stacks 50 seconds, and 4 stacks 60 seconds. Next up, we have Reaping Wellmaker. After activating your class ability, your next weapon final blow on a combatant spawns a Void Elemental Well. This would be great on a hunter as they can activate their dodge very frequently. Additionally, you do not have to match elements for this. I tested this using a solar subclass with an arc weapon and it spawned a Void Well. Next, we have Well of Utility, which states picking up a Void Elemental Well grants you additional class ability energy. Multiple copies of this mod increase the effect. This one is very similar to Well of Ordnance, but gives class ability energy instead of grenade energy, and it scales nearly the same as well. With 4 mods, I get about half my rift back, and with 1 mod, I get about a quarter back. So once again, stacking gives diminishing returns. Lastly, we have Well of Tenacity. Picking up a Void Elemental Well reduces the damage you take from combatants for a short period of time. When I pick up a Void Well, I get a resist timer for 5 seconds. This allows me to take reduced damage from any and all combatants. Kind of like that Elemental Well version of Protective Light, but you don't need to be red barred for it to activate. And that is it for the Void mods. Let us now move on to the Arc mods. First, we have Seeking Wells. Elemental wells you create will move across the ground toward nearby players. This mod is great because it doesn't force you to go out into combat to pick up your wells. The wells start seeking when you are within about 15 meters of them. However, this mod can be kind of buggy and just not activate at times, or it will periodically get stuck on different assets. Little things like rocks or uneven ground can cause them to get stuck. Next, we have Overcharge Wellmaker. Defeating a combatant with a finisher spawns 2 Arc Elemental Wells. This works just as stated. Do a finisher, get 2 Arc mods. And once again, this can be done on any subclass to create Arc Wells. Well of Ions is the next one where picking up an Arc Elemental Well causes your next melee to deal increased damage. For some reason, this was acting very buggy with the range melee on Middle Tree Stormcaller, but I tested it out on Hunter and Titan and it works as intended. This works great on Top Tree Arc Strider or Top Tree Striker Titan with Insurmountable Skull Fort because you can keep your melee ability up at all times. That being said, this also buffs just a regular melee as well. At base, my melee hits for 7103 damage, and then with the buff, it hits for 9234 damage, a 30% increase. On Striker Titan, my melee ability hits for 23,512 damage, and then with the buff, it hits for 30,566 damage. Once again, a 30% buff, so it doesn't matter if it's a regular melee or a charge melee. And with Combination Blow Hunter, at 3 times we can hit for 29,094 with a regular melee and 37,822 with the buff. That is a lot of damage. Pair that with a 1-2 punch shotgun and you can take out pretty much any major in the game, or a lost sector boss in 1 or 2 punches. It is pretty cool. I will have a full build guide coming out before Witch Queen on a build that perfects this technique, so make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss it. It is a solar player's dream build for survivability, and it absolutely wrecks in Gambit. And lastly, we have Well of Striking, which gives melee energy back when you pick up an Arc Elemental Well. Just like the others, you can stack this up to 4 times, and it scales from about a quarter energy at 1 stack to close to half energy at 4 stacks. And that brings us to the final set of Elemental Well mods with Stasis. Probably the strongest mod is Elemental Shards, as it makes Stasis Shards count as Stasis Elemental Wells. And since you can make a ton of shards very easily, this mod is extremely powerful with the right build. So powerful in fact, that this mod actually has a cooldown. When you pick up a shard, you have a 5-second cooldown before it activates again. This is done in the name of balance, as if your shards constantly acted as wells, you would pretty much have unlimited uptime on all your abilities. But even with the cooldown, this is an insanely strong mod when you put it into the right build. Next, we have Supreme Wellmaker, where casting your super spawns 3 Stasis Elemental Wells near you. This mod is not tied to any subclass, and it is very simple. Pop super, get wells. Next, we have Well of Restoration, which is basically a combination of the previous 3 mods that are like this. But instead of giving certain ability energy back, it gives energy to your ability with the lowest amount of energy. And once again, it stacks. However, since this mod is more versatile, it does not give quite as much energy back as the other 3, but it is still a decent mod. If you are out of melee but have a full grenade and class ability energy, then it will give you melee energy. I would probably only recommend running one of these, as of course it has diminishing returns. And now for the final mod, we will look at Elemental Time Dilation. This mod states elemental well mods that grant you time limited benefits can now stack, increasing the duration of the effect for each copy of the mod you have equipped. Now, much like Bountiful Wells, when I first tested this mod, I thought it was bugged. I thought you had to add time dilation mods to make the time last longer. Turns out, this is wrong. You have to add the mod with the time limited benefit. So let's take a look at Font of Might, because in all honesty, this is very much worth stacking for damage phases. So without elemental time dilation, Font of Might lasts for 10 seconds. And then with time dilation and 1 Font of Might mod, it lasts for 13 seconds. 2 Font of Light mods last for 16 seconds, 3 for 20 seconds, and lastly, with 4 mods, you can make Font of Might last for 30 seconds. That is a very long time for a damage buff to last. And as I said before, this buff stacks with other buffs. This is a great strat to use for DPS phases. Aethion's entire DPS phase is 30 seconds, so it is perfect for that. However, to run 4 of those mods plus time dilation will require 5 slots. So you cannot make Elemental Wells unless you use a seasonal artifact perk like Fire and Ice. So keep an eye out for a mod such as that in Witch Queen, as this will definitely be strats for a DPS phase for sure. As well, Wells can be used by a whole fire team. So realistically, if you wanted to do this for a DPS phase, you just need one guy to make a well that matches your subclass element. So as an example, a player could get a grenade kill with Elemental Ordnance to create a solar well for the whole fire team. Then the whole team could pick up that solar well and have the buff for 30 seconds. This would buff any solar weapon, so things like Cartesian Coordinate and Sleeper Simulant. Obviously that meta will change with Witch Queen, but the same math applies. Maybe Galahorn is the go-to instead. Well, you can have 6 galleys firing off 25% higher damage rockets for 30 seconds. This mod also affects things like Well of Life, Well of Ions, and Well of Tenacity. I will have a chart showing the different cooldowns that it gives now. Well of Tenacity lasts less time than the others, and remember, you have to stack the mod gaining the benefit, not elemental time dilation mods like I initially thought. What is cool is at 4 stacks you get huge gains. Exponential gains instead of diminishing returns like usual when you stack mods, but you have to fully commit. Anyways, that is going to do it for all the Elemental Well mods. As you can see, they are extremely strong and will be staples in my arsenal come Witch Queen. And that is it for the video. As I said in the opener, these mods are very strong and I think quite underrated. If you have a whole fire team running these mods, then you will be able to take advantage of them even more. And with the 3.0 subclass updates coming in the next year, you will probably be able to take advantage of them even better than ever. I hope this breakdown of elemental mods helped you out, and if it did, then a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. And that is going to do it for the 3-part series on the combat style mods. But as I said, I have one more mega video in store for you tomorrow, so be sure to check it out. I break down all the other armor mods that are not combat style mods, aside from the Raider and Nightmare Hunt mods, as those are too niche and are somewhat irrelevant now. As always, if you made it this far, then I love you and you are amazing. Happy build crafting, Guardians, and take care.